It appears that maybe, just maybe, we have discovered a way that the Big 12 could potentially afford to pay to add Florida State, Clemson, and other ACC schools to the conference if the ACC implodes, or if and when Clemson and Florida State get out. That's been a topic of discussion for several weeks, is would those schools go to the Big 12? And if so, how in the world would the Big 12 afford them? We may have an answer for that. We're going to talk about that in this live edition of Couz's Corner. Thank you all for stopping in, checking out the show. We're also we're going to talk about a new scenario that will help those schools get into Big 12 potentially. At the end of the show, I'm also going to give you an update on the situation regarding West Virginia football players, former West Virginia football players, and some of their complaints, I guess, about the university, the football program, and giving them access to it. I did a video on that I uploaded yesterday. There's been an update come out today that I'm going to provide for you. So, without further ado, before we jump into the first topic of the potential Big 12 addition, the potential additions of Florida State and Clemson to the Big 12 and how the Big 12 affords them and what scenario could initiate that or help that, I'm going to give a shout out to my channel sponsors. First one, I want to give a shout out to BetUS Casino and Sportsbook, who offers a 125% sign-on bonus for your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. And also Katz, Cantor, Stone. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians, because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is going on out there? Welcome into another live edition of Couz's Corner here on this Saturday. It's about 12:15 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you for joining me and spending your time with me. Thank you for those who are joining the show, whether you're on YouTube or on X. If you're on X and you want to check out some of my past videos, some of my past live streams, come over to my YouTube channel, watch videos over there, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to hit the notification bell to be notified of future uploads and future live streams that may pop up, because I do live streams. I don't really schedule them. I just do them when I can. So you need to make sure you have those notifications on. Now, let's jump into the topic of the day. Was listening to an episode of Greg Flugaur's college football speak around the corner with Greg Flugaur last night. And he talked about something that I've talked about this on my show before, a little bit of it anyway. I've talked about 2 years ago, I did a video, and I'll leave a link to it at the end here, or maybe in the description box. But anyway, I did a video about 2 years ago, before we even knew about the 4 corner schools coming in to the Big 12. Heck, it was before the Big 12 even had their extended media deal. But I did a video about the Big 12 and how they should consider adding a conference tournament, basically, at the end of their season to determine their conference champion, because I felt like that would bring more eyeballs to the conference. I felt like it would add some extra games to the TV schedule for the Big 12 that would bring eyeballs, increase media ratings, and help make money not only for the sponsors and the networks, but also for the schools. And I think I got the idea, if I recall, from an article in Heartland College Sports at the time. Well, and it's been talked about by a lot of other people. We've heard Immaculate talk about it on the College Football Mafia show and other shows. For those of you who don't know, Immaculate is a personality who's done YouTube shows, and also he's on X at Immaculate View, but he's talked about it a lot, how he thinks that's a possible scenario we could see down the road. Well, on last night's College Football Speaker on the Corner show, Greg Flugaur said he's hearing behind the scenes from some of his sources, that this could actually happen, that FBS conferences could actually create a scenario or a rule where they can play postseason tournaments, basically semifinals and finals, to determine their conference champion. And in order to do that, they would have to leave that last week of the regular season open. Instead of playing that 9th scheduled conference game, they would have to leave that 9th game as an open week, what they call a flex week or flex games. And then that way it would allow whoever's highest rated teams at the end of the season, the 4 highest rated teams could play each other in that semifinal. And then obviously the 2 winners playing the conference title game. And then the rest of the teams could be paired up as well to play meaningful competitive games against teams that are at or near them in the rankings. Now, there are obviously some logistical hurdles to doing something like this, right? You've got, in some conferences, you've got uneven scheduling already. Teams don't want to lose a home game to do this, because that's lost revenue as well. There are a lot of challenges. But according to Greg, the only way this would work and the only way teams would be willing to do this is if conferences form pods. Because if you form pods, then you could declare before the season starts, okay, these 2 pods are playing home games in the semifinals and finals. And these 2 pods are playing away games. And then that way, regardless of how it turns out, whatever pods those teams are in, that'll determine whether they play at home or away. And according to Greg and what he's hearing, that's the only way this would work. Because obviously, if you have conferences like they are now, let's just use the Big 12 as an example. You've got 16 teams, no pods, no divisions. You have unbalanced scheduling, obviously, because everybody can't play everybody because they only play 9 games. But when you get to the end of the year, teams, you either have 5 away games or 4 away games, depending on the season in conference. And then you have your out-of-conference games. Most teams play 6 or in some cases 7 home games a year, depending on their out-of-conference schedule. They do not want to give those up because it costs them revenue in a lot of cases. And it could be, if it's an FCS or G5 opponent, it could potentially be another win on their schedule. So they're not going to want to give up that extra home game. But they might be willing, in order to bring in more revenue for the league and entice a better TV deal down the road, or currently, which I'll get to in a minute, they might be willing to do this. But again, they would have to go to pods and set it up that way. Now, obviously, with the Big 12, it would be tough to do pods, right? Because geographically, how would it make sense? You've got West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF, the only 3 teams in the Eastern time zone. Then you have to go all the way to the Central time zone to Texas, Iowa, Kansas, schools in that part of the country, Oklahoma, before you get to the next closest teams, over 700 and in most cases 1,000 miles away. So how would pods make sense? Now you've got the ACC adding Stanford, Cal, SMU. How do pods make sense for them, right? So not sure they're ready to do this yet. And another thing you got to consider with pods is, how would a pod work? Let's look at the ACC, for example. What do they have? 17. If you take Notre Dame out of the equation because they're independent in football, you have 17 teams. How do you have pods with 17 teams? Even if you add a team in, let's just say theoretically Notre Dame decides to join the ACC, which they're not, but say they did. You can't do it with 18 either because it's not divisible by 4, right? You either need 16 teams, 20 teams, or 24 teams. Big 12 has 16 teams. But again, like I said, geographically, I'm not sure it would make sense to do pods. If I'm Houston or if I'm Iowa State or whoever, I'm not wanting to be in a pod with teams in the East, assuming you're going to be playing those teams each year, right? Now, what's that mean? That means you could see more realignment happen, right? It also means, so this could spur realignment. Like, for example, if, let's say, all Power 4 conferences decide they want to do this, they want to add that end of season semifinal game to determine their conference champion, or who plays in the title game, and then to help bring more eyeballs to those games and more profitable games, right, for the networks. Well, if that happens, the ACC would have to either drop or add teams to get to 16. They're probably not going to drop teams because, heck, Florida State and Clemson are probably going to leave anyway, right? So now you're down to 15. You'd need to add at least 1, if not more. Then you've got the situation with the Big 10 and the SEC, who both have 18 teams. They would likely have to add a couple teams, at least, to their league. So would they add Florida State and Clemson, or would they add UNC and NC State, or would they add, what would they do there? In the Big 12, where they sit, with 16 already, yes, technically they wouldn't have to add teams, but they probably would because they would want to get to 20. So that a 4-team pod system would make sense. You would have 5 pods or 4 pods of 5 teams, rather. That's the only way it would make sense. And in order to do that, what do you have to do? You have to add 4 teams. And here's where the networks come into play. According to Greg, a television network has already agreed to pay for this, that they want this to happen. So if that's the case, let's just say theoretically, now Greg never mentioned any specific conference, but let's just say it is the Big 12. If it's the Big 12 and ESPN and or Fox has agreed to pay more money for this game, that's good. But even if they haven't, let's say Brett Yormark in the Big 12 goes out here and decides, okay, we're going to add this semifinal game, which would be an extra game, and it's going to be a meaningful. Well, it's not really an extra game, but it's an extra meaningful game, right? We're going to add this extra meaningful game, which will add more viewership, add more eyeballs, add better ratings for the league because the game means something. They could go out potentially and get an additional third-party media company to chip in some money. If ESPN and Fox aren't willing to pay the whole freight, they could go get a third network, potentially. Now, obviously, Fox and ESPN would get first dibs on what games they want. And then after that, the third tier holder would be able to pick what games they wanted. So if that's the case, let's just say ESPN and Fox aren't willing to do it, they could go out and get someone like a TNT. They could get maybe a CW. They could get even a streaming service like an Amazon or a Netflix maybe to add that game to their service. They would chip in money for that game and maybe even other games. Who knows? Who knows? Especially if you add teams. If you add teams and you have extra inventory, let's say ESPN, for example, is willing to pay the freight for that extra game, but yet they don't want to pay extra freight to add more teams, right? They go out, they talk to TNT, they talk to CW, they talk to a streaming partner, they bring them into the fold. They're willing to chip in another, I don't know, 20 million, 40 million a year, whatever the number is. I'm just throwing out numbers. They're willing to chip in some extra money to get a few games of inventory every football season on their network. There you go. You've now helped add more money to your conference pot, so to speak, pot of money that would help pay for teams like a Clemson, like a Florida State, like a Louisville. Now, you might have to pay unequal revenue sharing, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm open-minded, I'm willing to listen, but I'm not sure it would work. Maybe that's what it would take. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's something to think about. Now, like I said, but this could open up a whole can of worms for all throughout the country. And this could ultimately be what makes teams decide to leave the ACC, because now if networks step up and are willing to pay extra for this, and these power conferences all of a sudden decide they need to add more teams in order to get to 20 or 24 so that they can form pods, they're going to take the most valuable teams they can grab. They're not going to want to get a G5 team unless they absolutely have to. They're going to want to get a power conference team. So the ACC obviously would be, to me, first right dead in the bullseye. But, depending on how these lawsuits play out in the courts, maybe teams aren't available yet. So what's that mean? Does that mean the SEC or the Big Ten start looking into the Big 12 for teams to try to get to that magic number of 20 or 24 or whatever it is they want to get to? So this is a situation where on the surface, it could be great for the Big 12, but at the same time, it could also be a threat to the Big 12, depending on what happens with the ACC. And speaking of the SEC, there's been some talk about whether or not they're going to add 9 conference games, whether or not ESPN is willing to pay for it, because right now they're only playing 8. Well, maybe this is why they're holding out. Maybe they've been talking about something like this with the networks versus adding a ninth just normal game. Maybe that ninth game is going to be that semifinal game instead of being a normal conference game. And maybe that is what has ESPN willing to chip in extra money. But again, they might have to add teams to make it work. We've heard from multiple sources that the North Carolina Tar Heels would be number one on the SEC's list. Who would they bring with them? Would it be NC State because they're kind of attached politically in the state, share the same board of governors? Would they get Virginia in the conference to add another state to their footprint, a southeastern state, mind you, to their footprint? Do they end up getting Florida State and or Clemson and going ahead and adding them to the fray? Same with the Big Ten. Do they decide to add, Florida State and Miami, or Florida State and Clemson, or Florida State and Georgia Tech, whoever? Pick teams, right? The problem is, though, you've got, and you've already got the 4 teams out west who could be in a pod together. You've got USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. There's your Western pod right there. But for the ACC now, their struggle would be, who do you put in a pod with Stanford and Cal? They're not going to want to be in a pod with Maryland and Rutgers. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can throw SMU in there, but you still need somebody else. So what do? Do they try to pick off, one of the Big 12 teams to try to bring into their pod, or, like a Utah, for example? There was a rumor out there that Utah had talked with the ACC not that long ago. Maybe that's how they're trying to entice Utah to get into the league. I don't know. It's forming a pod with Cal and Stanford. There's all kinds of scenarios as what could happen if this comes to fruition. But if networks are willing to pay extra revenue to these conferences and to these teams for this semifinal game, I guarantee you they're going to figure out a way to make it happen. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to money, because more money means you compete better, means you win more, hopefully leads you to winning more championships. We know that's not always the case. But that's where this could be heading. It's man, my head is spinning with so many different ways this thing could play out, but it could really, really kick the door open to more conference expansions, especially in the Power 5. It could even affect the Group of 5, because he did say all FBS schools could look at it, or all FBS conferences. If all FBS, Power 5 or G5 conferences could look at doing something similar. What does that mean for Washington State and Oregon State? You know what I mean? Does that open the door for them now to get into a Power 5 because they need 2 more teams for a pod? Maybe Washington State and Oregon State get added to the ACC if this happens, to go along with Cal and Stanford to form that Western pod. There's so many different scenarios. It's hard to tell how to play out. Greg said he doesn't predict anything to happen for at least 2 more years, but he thinks something will be announced about it, about the new scheduling model. Something will be announced about it before the end of this football season. So he doesn't think it'll be that much longer before we hear reports from folks in the media about how this could eventually play out. All right, before we move on to the next topic at hand, I want to get into the chat room real quick. You guys let me know. I got quite a few people in here. If you want to make sure your chat gets read and gets seen, you can drop a super chat. Hit the $ near the chat box there. Type it, highlights it. You can type your comment in or highlight your comment. I'll be sure to see it and put it on the screen and respond to it accordingly. See, I've got Joey Foster in the house. I got channel member WVU Earl, paid channel member. He says, "Hey, Couz, can't wait until football starts. Getting more excited every day." Same here, Earl, man. I cannot wait to August 31st, brother. Joey Foster's in the house. Says, "Good Saturday morning, everyone. You've got to love Saturday." We've got Cellophone Riot. We've got John Christophic, John Dry. We've got Jonathan Lewis. Go check out his channel called Bama Talk with Jonathan Lewis. I hope I got the name right. He's checking in on X. Thank you, Jonathan. He's also a contributor / partner over on Outlaw Sports with Jesse and John on that channel, so check it out as well. Checking in on X, we have Let's Go Team USA, Salt Lake 2034. What's up, brother Couz? What's up, brother? We have Jeff Morgan in the house. We have UT Parking in the house. most important game for West Virginia this year is all conference games would be number one. But as far as between Penn State and Pitt, I would say Pitt is more important just because it's a rivalry. And that game, losing that game is not going to sit well with fans. Losing to Penn State, though not good, they're going to be a top 10 team coming in more than likely. So, losing to them is not the end of the world. You can lose that game and still have a good season if you're West Virginia. So, to me, the Pitt game is more important. We have Mr. Monkey Says and G Smyrna 746 in the house as well. He thinks Kansas and North Carolina to the SEC. Hey, you never know. The SEC may want to strengthen their basketball. They might be sort of peaked out in football. Can they really get much better in football? Not sure they can. You already have Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, Ole Miss now's competitive. You have Tennessee. You have Auburn. My gosh, who else do you need, right? Maybe they try to strengthen other sports, like Olympic sports and basketball. Maybe that's the route they go. Very possible. And Greg Sankey has talked about in the past that they want to focus on all sports, not just football, and make the SEC the best conference in all sports. And they've done it. They've moved up the ranks in basketball. Alabama made a Final Four last year. Auburn's good in basketball. Tennessee's been good in basketball in recent years. We all know about the Kentucky brand in basketball, right? So the SEC is moving up that ladder in basketball now. And if you add teams like North Carolina and even Kansas into the conference, holy cow, that might automatically make them the best conference in both revenue earning sports. All right. Let me go to a real quick shout out to, actually, I'm not really doing a shout out this time, but I'm going to present to you a shout out from former West Virginia opponent, one of the best quarterbacks West Virginia has ever played against. Mr. Michael Vick has something he wants to say.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
All right, so thanks to BetUS again for helping power the channel here at Couz's Corner. Now, let me provide you with an update here about the situation at West Virginia. If you guys remember, I did a show yesterday. It was published yesterday about some West Virginia players, former West Virginia players, coming out on social media and complaining that they were not getting free access anymore to West Virginia games. Pardon me. They were not getting free access to West Virginia football games anymore, and that they were being required to make a donation to the program through the Mountaineer Athletic Club. Well, an article has been written about this today. Apparently, there's been an update, and I'm going to read you this article because I want to make sure that we get the story straight here. Because I said in my video, I want to hear both sides of the story. Well, here's the schools or the Mountaineer Athletic Club side of the story. And let me make sure everybody can see this here. Bear with me one second. Let me switch over to full screen view. Take this off real quick. There we go. And then I'll put that back up in a minute. But it says, I just want to make sure. WVU ticket flap, a miscommunication. Over the past couple of days, let me try to enlarge this a little bit too, make it easier to read. All right. Over the past couple of days, concern was raised online over an apparent change in policy concerning ticket access for former WVU football players to Mountaineer home games. Some WVU football alums, in receipt of a letter outlining the current policy, a change in registration procedures, and a method of addressing any situations where the demand for complimentary tickets would be greater than those available, were understandably confused by the missive, which seemed to indicate that Mountaineer Athletic Club donations and priority giving levels would be the method by which tickets for former players would be allocated this year. The letter said in part that quote, priority will be determined first by your Mountaineer Athletic Club donor level, and then your rank within your donor level by priority points, end quote. That seemed to indicate that more and higher donations would be required of former football players to receive complimentary tickets. According to Senior Associate AD and Mountaineer Athletic Club Executive Director John Patterson, however, donor levels to the MAC for these tickets will only apply if the demand for the complimentary tickets for varsity club members outstrips supply, which has never happened. Now, the varsity club is a group for former Mountaineer players. They join this club. I think it only costs $50 a year to join, and with that, they get complimentary tickets. Pretty good deal if you ask me, but let's keep going. It says, we have never had a situation where we have denied any former players who requested tickets or access via the varsity club, said Patterson. Last year for the Pitt game, there was a heavier demand, and we made more tickets available for WV varsity club members. We are doing the same for the Penn State game this year. The WVU Varsity Club is the venue by which former WVU athletes keep ties to the school. Membership is only open to that group and has a $50 yearly fee. That fee remains the same for 2024 as it was in previous years and also makes them members of the MAC. So there are no additional hurdles which former football players must clear to be eligible for tickets. There are, according to Patterson, a couple of procedural changes to the request process for tickets this year aimed at making it easier to manage. But anyway, I don't think I need to read the whole article. I'll leave a link to it in the description when we're done here. I do want to read this part. It says, multiple former players were contacted for comment on the letter and their interpretation of it, but none were ready to go on the record, with some awaiting more clarification from the MAC. Patterson noted that he is aware of the concerns which the letter raised and said that a clarification communication to varsity club members is in the works. He also emphasized that the MAC and the varsity club does not view this ticket program as a fundraising venture and that maintaining connection with the former athletes remains the top priority. He says, we are in their corner and we are committed to engagement with our former student athletes, Patterson said. We made the online change to make it easier and more equitable for everyone to request their tickets. The players' membership cost is not increasing and no additional MAC donations will be required. And it goes on to talk about how there's now a vacancy at the top of the varsity club. They're trying to hire a new director. They haven't done that yet, so that might have caused some problems as well. But anyway, so it sounds to me like this is a complete misunderstanding. Players will still get free tickets to complimentary tickets to games if they are a member of the varsity club. So thank you for putting that article out there. Let me give ticket to the writer here. That is Kevin Kinder. Kevin Kinder with Blue Gold News put that article out. And again, I'll leave it in the description box, but if you want to read the whole thing. But apparently when they have games where the ticket is in higher demand, tickets are in higher demand than what they may have allocated, they have to determine who gets those tickets. So they're going to look at players who made donations and how much they donated in order to give them those tickets, decide who gets tickets above and beyond what's already been allocated. That's the way I interpret it. I could be completely wrong in that. If I am, someone let me know in the comments. But it seems to me like if you're a member of the varsity club, you're still going to get your complimentary tickets up to a certain amount. Obviously, they don't have thousands of tickets just lying around, right? I think 100 is the most I think 100 is typically how many they have, and they normally don't even get that many requests unless it's a big game like Pitt or Penn State. So I understand they have to have a procedure in place to manage who gets those tickets once they go above and beyond their allotment or their allocation. They're making more tickets available for players, but they have to have a way to decide who gets them. And to me, that's a fair way to do it. Maybe I'm missing something, but it appears that whole thing, which was started, first player I saw put something out was Tim Lindsay, a former long snapper. Other players like Darius Raynaud, Brian Joswiak, and others chimed in, but it looks like it was all a big misunderstanding. The school, the varsity club, that Mountaineer Athletic Club, has now spoken out, given their side of what's actually going on. So that makes me happy. I'm glad to see that it may have been a misunderstanding. I hope the players will now come out and say, hey, this was a misunderstanding. We're all good, because, that was a bad PR move. I even had someone criticize me for doing the video I did, because of the potential blowback it could cause. But hey, it's my job to kind of come on here and report to you guys what I read and hear and what I think. That's what you guys want, right? That's what I'm here for. But anyway, and I didn't bash anybody. I just brought to you the story. But anyway, that being said, it was a bad PR deal for the school, for the football program, to make it appear that former players and the school were not seeing eye to eye. And there are still going to be former players who are disgruntled. I get it. Darius Reynolds said he hasn't stepped foot in West Virginia since 2018. But what Darius needs to understand, 2018, we had a different coach, a different athletic director. It's not the same people in charge now. I'm sure if he wanted to, they would allow him back. They would probably love to have him back. Coach Brown and Rimbacker have both embraced former players. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So it appears it was all a big misunderstanding, and I'm glad to see that. It makes me happy as a Mountaineer fan. All right, let me go to the chat room here, see what you guys might have to say. I'm going to have to enlarge my screen here because I cannot see for the life of me what you guys are putting in here. I do have new glasses coming next week, so hopefully I'll be able to see better. All right. We have infamous front runner says, how does KU go to the SEC when they have a contract with Fox? Great question. If this doesn't happen anyway until like 26, 27 or 25, 26, then, well, I think it was 26, 27 that Greg expected it to happen. That means the Big 12 would only have, 3 to 4 years remaining on their contract. It would be a little easier to get out of a contract. I don't think Kansas is going to the SEC. That was just one scenario that's been talked about and rumored. I don't think it's going to happen. But again, it is in today's world of conference realignment, anything is possible. Cronger said Neil Brown needs a full beard. Yeah, he has grown himself a beard. I think he has a goatee. John Dry says, UT Parking, you should change your name to Tex Parking since you are in the SEC, and UT is Tennessee, LOL. That is a huge debate now in the SEC is which team is UT, Tennessee or Texas? At John Dry, Tennessee was founded as Blount College, my LA Mayo. Then they were East Tennessee University until after University of Texas were established. We are UT. So he's saying, hey, University of Texas was established before University of Tennessee, so they claim the UT name. That's UT Parking. That's fair, my man. And great job on the research there. You educated me today. Infamous front runner says, seems people forgot who actually pulling the strings. It's the networks at the end of the day. The only guy who should get free access to NEW Sports is Pittsnoggle. Yeah, I actually, I'm not going to mention any names, but I was able to talk to a former player, and he basically said in a nutshell, look, man, we shouldn't be freeloaders. He doesn't think they should be. He does think the university should, make it easier for them to get access and things like that and help them out. But they don't necessarily need to just give everybody free tickets. So, not every player agreed necessarily with, or former player, I should say, necessarily agreed with what was put out there. And not every player is a member of the varsity club either. So, but that's their choice. And they choose that. And they know the varsity club's there if they want it. Some of them may choose not to do it for whatever, various reasons. UT Parking says the SEC doesn't want FSU and Clemson. They can grow the pie with NC and Virginia without making football too competitive. The less prominent football schools in the SEC don't want more competition. That's a great point. If you're Ole Miss, and I don't even want to put them, they're competitive now, but Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, the teams that haven't historically been as good necessarily, why would you want to bring in a team who might actually hurt your chances of getting in the playoff? That's not good. PA Mountaineer says, part one, wait a minute. So you can play football at a university before NIL, not get any compensation except for a degree and get no revenue from the university. Then you have to pay to be a part of the club to get tickets, and then the university chooses who gets to go by how much they pay. it's only $50, man. First off, majority of those guys, not all of them, but a majority of them can probably afford $50. And they get a lot more perks for $50 than other members get. Other members of the MAC get. So there is something to it. And to me, you're not putting enough value around the college education, to be honest with you. But that's just my opinion. Again, I do think the university needs to do things for the players, make it easier for them, make it less expensive for them. But to just give out thousands of tickets for free every week doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? And they don't. I mean, they don't usually have that many players requesting them anyway, but you see my point. The Mississippi school still lose to Texas Tech. Charles Peterson said he's glad the icons who helped build the program shall not be forsaken. Carla says, please hit the like button. Listen to Carla. Carla is very smart. Thank you, Carla. Appreciate it. So, we've only been on here 36 minutes. Real quick, guys, I haven't done this in a while. I want to give a shout out to my good friends over at WV Sports Now, Mike Oster, Ethan Bach, the crew. They agreed to partner with me several months ago. They have a behind the scenes and ad free portion of their website called The Holler. You can join that for a year at a 40% discount if you use promo code Couz at checkout. Again, go to wvsportsnow.com, go to The Holler, sign up, type in Couz at checkout. You'll get a 1-year membership for $20.99. It's a $34.99 value. You get it for $20.99 with promo code Couz. Again, that's with wvsportsnow.com. Thanks to those folks for partnering with me on the channel. I want to make sure I gave them a shout out. But to recap, what's up, Immaculate? Good morning. I guess it's earlier over in your neck of the woods. Immaculate has talked about this for quite a while. As a matter of fact, Immaculate, if you're not doing anything, my man, would you like to come on here and join me for the conversation? I'd love to hear your take on this, on what Greg had to say on the show last night. If so, I'll be glad to send you the link, my man. Matter of fact, I'm just going to do that right now. Oops, hit the wrong button. Cancel. All right, Immaculate, you have link incoming, my man. Immaculate has talked about this for quite some time now. It's coming on an XDM, Immaculate. If you can't join me, I totally understand, but you're welcome to. You can do audio. That's cool. No worries. Totally up to you, my man. How we doing, Immaculate?
Good, man. How do I sound? Is this all right?
You're fine.
All
I
right.
appreciate you coming on for a few minutes. What time is it in your neck of the woods?
It is about 9:45 here.
Okay.
Yeah, here in Arizona, it's basically Pacific time, and then
Right.
when time changes, we're on Mountain time. So
I forgot it was. I forgot you lived in Arizona.
yeah,
I was
A little
for
bit
some
out
reason
west.
because you're an Iowa fan. I had
Yeah.
for some reason I had Iowa in my head.
Born and raised Iowa, but out here in the desert now.
Awesome. All right. So, what are your thoughts? I'm assuming you saw Greg's show. Matter of fact, I know you did because I know you called in.
Yeah.
But so, just what are your thoughts when you heard his report about, there being actual, real, legit talks now in the conference at the conference level about, doing this conference semifinal deal at the end of the season?
Well, when I called in, one of the things I want to ask him was like, how long have those talks been going on? And he confirmed that it's been going on for a while, which makes a lot of sense to me, because people might wonder, well, why have I been talking about this for a while? It's because this is not new. This is the old plan. This plan's been going on since, well back when West Virginia was the center of realignment back in 2010, 2012. They've just never had the ability to get the rules passed to do it. And so the intriguing part about this, from what he's pointing out as a theory on how they would do it, is that it gets around the rules, the current rules. That once again, whenever they bring up pods, it's because they don't have new divisional rules. So pods are basically subdivisions. That's how you recreate divisions, right? When you only have 2, but you really need to have more than 2 divisions.
Right.
So it's kind of code word for how you do divisions without new divisional rules.
Got it.
And the postseason, to have it during the regular season, is once again due to the NCAA rules, which limit them to only having the conference championship game and nothing else in the postseason. Okay. So while PR wise, it sounds good, like, oh, we care about the kids, we don't want to add weeks on. That's where I call a little BS.
Yeah.
And that's just me, and maybe I'm wrong, but I tend to think it's because they can't. And so, and if that continues on, then I would watch for like week 1 and week 0, which are pretty much empty, to become much more used. And so, if they'll push those games forward and then kind of use the whole season a little bit more, give themselves some, buys right before these games. But it's intriguing. It's interesting. It's and it tells me that I think the House settlement situation is getting held up longer than they expected. So they're having to switch from thinking like, in my opinion, that governance is going to go right on top of the autonomous conferences system setup. They're just going to empower it. It was never supposed to be this, lack of a better term, unempowered. But when they got it made, they really had their hands tied behind them back in 2014, which is also the year when the CFP was formed. So I honestly think the CFP eventually in the future will be decreased in size. We love it as fans, right? But it kind of looks like it's a headache for those people, right? Trying to come to agreements. So if everyone has their own conference tournament and everyone's selling your conference tournament, and then you go to a smaller national tournament, that's what I think the original plan was. So really, this is just telling me that they're still on that plan. And it's been delayed. So now they're trying to find a way to institute this and install this to get more money, because each one of those games has a little more meaning, right? Like if it's instead of it just being a regular season game, it's leading up to positions in a conference tournament, the value is higher. That's why when he says the networks like it, well, because it makes each one of their games mean more. Correct. Which means advertising has to pay more to be on it.
Yep.
So that's it. I thought it was a great sign and very interesting about how it's coming out.
And I know you talked about this a lot over the last couple of years, over at on College Football Mafia and other shows you've been on, contributed to. So I wanted to make sure I brought you on and got your take. But what really intrigued me, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is when he brought up the fact that the networks liked it, which I think we all that's kind of common sense, right?
Yeah.
And then he talked about how he brought up something that I've talked about a lot when it comes to the Big 12, but I think in this case it could apply to anybody. But adding a third TV partner, or in some cases a second TV partner for the SEC, in the case of the ACC or the SEC, or fourth, I guess, in the case of the Big 10. But nonetheless, adding an extra TV partner to show the game. So if that happens, my head went automatically to, okay, that's how you pay. If you have to do pods, some of the conferences are going to have to bring in more teams to have, so you can have even pods.
Correct.
That's how you pay for expansion.
Yeah.
That's how you pay the freight for expansion, is by bringing in that third or fourth or whatever network to the table. Like in the Big 12's case, maybe they go out and get a TNT, or maybe CW wants to add a few games of inventory, or maybe Netflix or Amazon wants to get involved, whoever, Apple, whatever. Just pick somebody, right?
Yep.
And maybe that's how you even pay for an ACC. If the ACC does implode or teams want to leave, maybe that's how the Big 12 pays to get them in. Just throwing that out there.
No, I think you're right on, and he was really trying to hint to that without going too far.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I picked up on it immediately, to be honest,
yeah.
because that's where my mind automatically goes
You
anyway.
should be. That's absolutely where you guys should be looking at, especially in the Big 12, because I know I've been looking at the situation, trying to figure out how would they possibly bring over Florida State and Clemson. That was a talking point for them. I'm like, how has that even become reality? Because a lot of people, when they look at these things, they want to say that's just BS right off the bat, and then they can dismiss it. And I try not to do that. I try to approach every single one of these ideas and figure out how it could be possible before I dismiss it. And so I looked at it like, the only way that I see that as being possible is if they were bringing in another major partner. And you couldn't announce that partner until after, say, the addition or whatever. But that doesn't mean they can't talk with that network partner right now. I mean, Yormark might already have an agreement in hand, like, handshake, but not already out. And the one that I've said that I think is ripe for coming into college sports heavy is TNT Sports under WB. They're already with the Big East now. They've already moved in with the Mountain West, which that's another intriguing story that this really maybe opened up a possibility on, but we can get into that a little later if you want. That's not really, I know, what you guys are probably caring about. But neither one of those are like a main brand for them. They're, the Mountain West is nice, but it's not a major brand. And the Big East, they're a secondary partner.
Right.
So, and kind of looks like with Fox and ESPN, neither one of them is looking at the Big 12 as a main thing. They're doing it well. I mean, you're getting good looks on both, but they both have, the SEC as a main or the Big 10 as a main.
Right. Correct.
This would give TNT a chance to come in and say, hey, we'll carry this. We'll be the main partner, and you guys can be our secondary partners on this. They're going to still have like really some of the really good Big 12 games are probably going to go to Fox and ESPN. Correct. Still.
They would still get first dibs on games. They would have, because they're the primary rights holders.
Yeah, exactly. And, maybe in the next deal, TNT gets totally up there. But for now, and they've proven to be a good partner to both of these, right? TNT with ESPN, they took the first round games that no one else wanted to buy. They're like, we'll do it. We'll take that risk. We'll take on the NFL. We got you.
Yep.
And then with Big East, that's a Fox brand.
Yep.
And they worked with Fox as a secondary. So, and with Venue, even though that's being challenged, it still shows that those three are working together very closely. So if I'm the Big 12, that's who I'm looking at. And maybe it is an Amazon or an Apple.
Yeah. But, I've been talking about how I've kind of tied together, and I've talked about this on previous shows, but if you look at the Big 12's relationship with Endeavor, well, who's Endeavor's sister company? TKO Holdings, right? Who does TKO Holdings own? The WWE. Who did WWE just sign a huge contract with? Netflix.
Yeah.
I mean, look, and Netflix, there are rumors, I'll call it speculation out there, that they want to get into live sports space. And I mean, WWE is considered a sport. It's sports entertainment, but it's a sport, a type of sport.
It's athletic.
And they're getting into that space now. Who's to say they don't want to expand that? And they might be willing to pay a lot of money for it because they're wanting to get their foot in the door, right? Sometimes companies will be willing to pay a little extra money to enter the space, maybe more so than an ESPN would, because they don't need to, right? So I wouldn't count Netflix out in something like this either. And then, like you said, I think TNT, to me, because they just lost the NBA deal. Their stock, I read the other day that their stock took the Warner Brothers Discovery stock took a nosedive the other day. They need something to prop them up, and I think something like this could help. It may not be the savior, but it could help. And then here's what I'm thinking though. If this happens, okay, what does the ACC do? Because you can't have Stanford and Cal out by themselves in a pod. You know what I mean? Does that open the door for Washington State and Oregon State now to get into the ACC? Or do you think the ACC goes and tries to steal a Utah or an Arizona, something like that, because of their AAU affiliation? What are your thoughts there?
That's all possible, and that may be the case. It's hard because I think the ACC can probably see multiple paths in their future that they could go down, and none of them are perfect.
Right.
To put it nicely, I mean, this situation where you've got two major conferences now, the P2, we'll call them, I guess, looking at you saying, okay, we're really not all that much interested in anything that's left in the Big 12. They're both, their gazes are directly on the ACC. That's not a comfortable position to be in. So you kind of have to figure out what could we do in the future. Well, that's going to depend upon what some of their major brands are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen rumors: is Notre Dame and Stanford, are they looking to go? Do they stay? You know, do you lose to Florida State, to Clemson, and some of your top public schools? Now, do you want to become a private school focused conference? And real quickly, what that means is these conferences are going to be able to write their own rules here shortly. Not all of them, but many of them. You know, about payments and one of the something the privates do is they don't necessarily make admissions. Basically, if you're going to come in and play a sport there, including football, you have to meet the same admission standards as every other student. A lot of the publics don't do that. So the privates have been playing under the public's rules within these conferences the whole time. Yeah. This is their one opportunity to actually create their own conference where their rules and the way they want to do business rules.
Yeah.
Now, if whether that happens or not, I don't know. I just see the opportunity for them to do that should they take it. And when you see a Notre Dame there, you see a Stanford there, you see a Duke there, and you see a lineup of other privates that are already there, Miami, there's an aligning. And when you hear all this talk about Florida State and even now Georgia Tech and Clemson and North Carolina State and Virginia Tech and Virginia, and all this talk about movement, you really don't hear that much about Miami, and that kind of shocks me. So I think that could possibly become that. And then what you would have is 4 major conferences that all have a different model. Your SEC is largely regional based, but with a national coverage. Your Big 10 is your big national brand. Your Big 12 becomes kind of your Cinderella major conference where anyone could come out of it and challenge, because it's such a tough schedule all year long that your top schools that come out of there are actually probably going to be a lot tougher than most people give it credit for right now. We'll find out. We'll see.
Right.
But I think that's the new thing. Instead of having 5 major conferences that all operate under the same model but in different regions, which makes some better than others, it's a new type of a model where each conference is its own thing. But they could they maybe go for Washington State and Oregon State, but I tend to think some of those schools are real picky about who their peers with and who they bring in.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I just, if you're going to have to go to this pod system, it doesn't make sense for Stanford to be in a pod with with teams in the Eastern, Duke or Virginia Tech or just name one, right, on the coast, Boston College. So
I think that you'd probably see like what I would think with the ACC, if this private thing comes about, is like Rice would join. So you'd have Rice and SMU in Texas, and that would probably be who Stanford and California would go with. It's not all the way out there, but
no, it's better than I see, but definitely better than going to Boston or.
And it's a combo of California and Texas, so there's a lot of recruiting power there. I mean, they could become something at some point. And don't sleep on these elite privates and all their money and what they can now do in the NIL age. This might become shocking to some folks in the future, where some of these schools actually rise up.
And don't rule out USF either. Even though I know they're not in the West.
Oh no,
but as far as getting into the ACC,
they could be there.
Yeah, CFB Plus says this is a great question. He says, at Couz, I think the problem with adding, or a great statement, I should say, I think the problem with adding a third partner is that since it's a conference game, they have already sold those games to their current partners. So they would have to use existing partners. And he goes on to say, or the current partners would have to sell it. Here's how I want to respond to that is CFB Plus, yes, ESPN and Fox would get first dibs on what games they get. So they may take that game. They may take that semifinal game. But here's the thing. If the Big 12 does, if they do end up having to add 4 teams so that they can do a pod system, that's extra inventory for the rest of the season as well that they have to get a home for. That's where you may bring in that third partner. And as far as selling it, yes, maybe ESPN and Fox just subleases the games to Warner Brothers Discovery, or which is TNT, or whoever, CW, whoever. That's definitely on the table. They've done it before. I mean, that's what they're doing with the ACC now. They're sub-licensing games to the CW right now.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that?
I think he's right in that under normal situations that's pretty difficult to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
But we've already seen that both of those companies seem to have worked pretty well with, like, say, TNT,
mm-hmm.
whether it's over multiple different agreements now. So that's why I would look for that, because of what he's saying. Like, that's not a usual situation where companies could kind of figure this out, but they've already come to terms on some difficult situations. So I think that they could find a way to do it.
Right.
As far as details on how that would come about, I don't know. I'm definitely not the man for that. But
right. Same.
I think that we've seen examples now of those 3 companies being willing to work together closely. Like that venue app, about having like
mm-hmm.
all of our customers are now going to have access to all of your inventory.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the pinnacle of agreements right there that shows.
Yeah, that's a monopoly to me. But anyway, that's
it's getting challenged by DOJ,
right.
and
right.
whether it becomes something not in this conversation probably doesn't matter as much as the fact that they actually came to terms with each other to make that.
Yep.
Which that shows like an institutional cooperation between them. So,
mm-hmm.
Like I said, I actually don't think it comes out. I do think the DOJ is going to come on it, but we can still use it as an example of why TNT might have the head start on getting in with the Big 12.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Well, Immaculate, man, I really appreciate you jumping on. I'm getting ready to call it an afternoon, but I appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing your insights.
Yeah, I saw you were on this morning. I was like, I wanted to come in and see what you had to say on this.
Yeah. Where can people find you at on X?
Well, I see you got on your little ticker down there. I'm at Immaculate View. Just put up some words yesterday about the situation, and I think that we're going to get some major articles about this week. I think that Greg's rush to get that out means this is coming out this week, and he just got a little heads up to get out ahead of it.
Yep.
So
that's what I was thinking too.
Expect a busy week, and I'm probably going to be a little more busy on Next this week coming up, and I'll be looking to see if you have your shows on, man. I'm always listening, trying to catch you and see what you have to say on this.
I appreciate the support, and again, thanks for hopping on, and look forward to keeping up with what you're having to say out there in the social media world, and I'm sure we'll see you pop up on some other shows as well. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Sure thing, man. Talk to you later, buddy. Have a good one.
Have a good one. You too. So there was Immaculate from Immaculate View on X, also a contributor on some channels. Occasionally you'll find him over at College Football Mafia, but I really always enjoy his insights. He loves realignment. He studies realignment. He reads about every article, watches every show. He's really good at reading the tea leaves, and we're all speculating, right? Most of this is speculation. Now, what Greg's telling us about the talks about this semifinal game, that's not speculation. But what we're talking about as far as how the conferences will do it, will they use the money to buy a team or, bring teams into the conferences, those things, that's all speculation. Okay. I'm not here predicting anything to happen other than the fact we'll probably see conference semifinal games in the future. Outside of that, who knows what else happens, especially with the realignment and what teams end up where. At the end of the day, it's all just kind of fun to speculate, think about, and all that. But yeah, got Appalachia Africa Twin, who's a VIP member in the house too. Says, afternoon all. What's up, Appalachia Africa Twin? Thank you for your membership. Also have a comment here by Big 12 Plus. Says 18-team conference. Winners with the second and third best record play, and the top-rated pod winner plays a wild card team from the entire conference. Makes playing for the wild card slot interesting. That's another outside the box idea. I mean, at the end of the day, the Big 12 has got to do whatever they can to be relevant, to get as many eyeballs on their conference as they can, and try to get as much revenue as they can, because their schools are going to continue to be at a disadvantage from the Big Ten, the SEC, and even the ACC to a smaller degree, at least for now, right? Who knows what will happen there. But the Big 12 needs to do everything it can to try to stay relevant. And at the end of the day, I think that's what they have to do. And thinking outside the box, again, is with this semifinal thing is a way to do that. But like Greg did say, this may not just be a Big 12 thing. He didn't even mention it. I'm bringing the Big 12 into this as a theory. Greg did not mention a conference specifically. But I think if any conference does it first, it would probably be them, just because Brett Yormark's always looking at different things and different ideas. Appalachia Africa Twin with the $10 super chat. He says, just some light bill money for you, Couz. Thank you for today's show. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you coming on. I said, brother, thank you for coming on. Hopefully you are a male. Anyway, I appreciate Michael D. Hart says he's playing toilet paper and wiping up the rear. Better late than never. Nothing wrong with that, Michael. You can always go back and check out the show once it's posted to YouTube as an on-demand video, man. So no worries there. Appreciate everybody coming in. Appreciate you hopping on and listening to me rant here and talk a little bit for about an hour. Apologize. I started the show out a little bit rough. I wasn't quite on my A game today, but that's all good. It happens. And plus, it's live TV. You never know what you're going to get, right? Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope all of you have a top shelf day, have a top shelf weekend. And don't forget, Q Country Roads.